Hi, in today's video I'm going to take a look at setting up Wi-Fi on FreeBSD and creating a lagg device as a failover mode between Ethernet and wireless devices. What this allows you to do is have your Ethernet plugged in and the wireless activated at the same time, so that when you unplug the Ethernet cable it automatically switches to Wi-Fi. This is really handy because you don't have to restart a lot of services and muck about changing interfaces and configuration files. And the way that this is done is by overriding the Ethernet interface's MAC address with that of the wireless interface. So let me get this set up and show you how this works. A bit of tea first. So this is the FreeBSD Handbook, and these are the steps that you need to go through. So first of all, what you actually do is you either plug in an external device or use an internal Wi-Fi card, and you use ifconfig to actually create the wireless device. So ifconfig WLAN, create WLAN, and you can see here we've got ATH0, and you would replace that with the name of your card. And what this will do is it will actually show you the Ethernet address, as you can see here, for the wireless card. And that is what we're going to be using to add to the Ethernet MAC address. So once you've got the MAC address for the wireless interface, what you actually do, replacing, you can see here in these examples, these are the cards RE0. So this is the Ethernet address. This is the Ethernet card. And what you're doing is you're saying ifconfig, the name of the Ethernet interface, change the MAC address to this, which would be the MAC address of the wireless interface. You bring up the Ethernet address, you create a lagg interface, and what you do is you set the lagg interface to be connected to the Ethernet and the wireless, and it should look something like this. So what I'm actually going to do is show you the configuration. So this is the block of code that you'd actually put in your rc.conf. So there's two parts to this. One, your rc.conf, and the second is your pf.conf. So in my rc.conf here, etc. rc.conf, what you'll see is, if I zoom this in a bit, okay, lagg over failover device, Ethernet MAC address set to Wi-Fi MAC address. So this is my Ethernet card here, UE0, and we're setting the MAC address to the MAC address of the Wi-Fi card. And I'm running FreeBSD on a Dell XPS 15 2019 model, and the Wi-Fi card is a Killer 6, which is actually supported by IWL Wi-Fi. So the first step is we set the Ethernet MAC address to the Wi-Fi card's MAC address. We then have WLANs, and this here, IWL Wi-Fi.0, that is the name of my card. Different cards will have different names that show up, like ATH0, Run0, but in this case, we're using the IWL Wi-Fi driver. And what we're doing here is saying WLANs IWL Wi-Fi equals WLAN 0. And what that is going to be is that's the name of the interface that is going to be created and will show up in ifconfig. We then have an option here, ifconfig WLAN 0 WPA. So that's specifying that we want to use WPA. And the next step we have down here is create args WLAN 0 country, and then the country code for the country you're in. And the reason you need to do this is because in different countries, you're allowed to use different frequencies with the Wi-Fi card, so you need to set that. The next thing we have here is the cloned interface. So what we have to do is actually create a cloned interface. And what I have here is lagg 0. This is the interface that we need to create. The next one here, lo1, is actually what I use for jails. And I mention that because you can only use clone interfaces once in your rc.conf. So if you're using a jail as well, you would put the cloned interface in here. If you're not using a jail, just ignore this lo1 and just use the lagg 0. Finally, what we have down here is if config lagg 0 equals up, lagg proto, failover, laggo port. Okay, so this is the Ethernet address. This is my Ethernet interface, UE0. And finally, we have WLAN 0 and then DHCP. So that's one part. The next part, which is really useful, is our pf.conf. So let me just bring this up. So now in your pf.conf, typically what you do is you specify an interface that's going to be used with your rules. And as you can see here, I've got some stuff commented out. So I have this USB to Ethernet adapter, which is UE0. Okay. And what you can see here is I have other things commented out for like Wi-Fi. And the issue is normally what you have to do if you're switching from wired to wireless is you actually have to edit your pf.conf and change the interface that's going to be used from from Ethernet to Wi-Fi and then restart PF, which is a bit annoying. But what you can do now is you can create this int underscore if equals lagg 0 lagg failover device. And what this will do is this will work with both your Ethernet and your wireless. So that because this is a cloned interface, what happens is this lagg device will work with your PF configuration for both Ethernet and wireless. So you don't actually have to change your PF config every time you're switching between the two. So that's really handy. So what I'm going to do now is come across to my if config. And what you'll see here is we have the loopback device, LO0. Can I make this any bigger? Forget how you do that. So we've got the loopback device. That's the regular thing. Then we have the WLAN device that we created. Now, what I want to show you that's important is if you look at this WLAN device here and you look at the Ethernet here. Okay, that's really annoying me. Let's try that again. So the Ethernet here, what you'll see is the Ethernet address is exactly the same on the WLAN 0 device, the lagg device, and the Ethernet device as well. What you'll also notice is you can see here there is no IP address listed under the WLAN device. Now, if I come down to the, let me just come down to the Ethernet device at the bottom, what you'll see is the Ethernet device here, 78A3. Oh, fuck off. Right, matches one up here, 78A3. Right, so we've got the same Ethernet device, and you'll also see here, even though I'm running on the Ethernet now, that there is no IP address listed for the Ethernet interface here. This LO1, this is a loopback device for jails, so you can just ignore that. But if we have a look at the lagg 0 device here, what you'll see is we have the same Ethernet address 78.A3 as we do on the WLAN 0 device and on the Ethernet device. And you'll notice that this device actually has an IP address. So the IP address, the DHCP client configuration, etc., rc.conf, you'll see that's just specified in the lagg 0 device in our rc.conf. Okay, so what that basically means is I'm now on Ethernet. So this is on Ethernet. So FreeBSD forum. I should be able to unplug the Ethernet device, and it's now working. It's still working. Okay, so the Ethernet is unplugged, and it's automatically switched to Wi-Fi. So I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to restart any services. I didn't have to edit my pf.conf and change the interface and restart pf. You don't have to, restart netif, routing, any of that stuff. I'll just plug the Ethernet back in. And it's now back on Ethernet. Okay, and this is the IWL Wi-Fi page with the, is it this one? Yeah, the Wi-Fi killer Intel Wi-Fi 6, I think it is. Let's have a bit more tea. So what can you do with this? What's the advantage of having this set up? What it basically means is you've got everything set up, your computer plugged in with Ethernet. You can just easily unplug it and it's automatically going to switch to Wi-Fi. You don't have to do anything. And the way that it works is that it uses WPA supplicant. So you have to have a, WPA supplicant config with the SSD and password set up. And then it will then use that to switch to Wi-Fi. Now, the other really good thing about this is you can also use this with an external Wi-Fi card as well. In this case, I'm using this with an internal Wi-Fi card, but you can use it with a something like an alpha Wi-Fi card. Well, actually, I know where. Just there's a handy link if I can actually find the post. Probably not. Perfect laptop. Yep. I think this is the one. A style. Where is it? I thought it was this one. Maybe it's not. I was having a conversation with A style on Freebsd forum, and he's got a alpha card. Let me just check if it's in another post. Probably. Hang on, let me just go back. I think it was down here. Yeah. Okay, this is the card that I've got. Okay. This is an alpha wireless card. And when you plug this in, it will be identified as run 0. So what I have here, let me just close this one. Okay, so this is the configuration for my MacBook running FreeBSD, and I'm using a Alpha external Wi-Fi card because it uses Broadcom chips on the Mac. So in this case, what we have is we're using the same Ethernet dongle, so it has the same name here, UE0, but you can see here the wireless interface name is run0. So in this case, what I can actually do on the MacBook is actually still boot up with just Ethernet plugged in, and it'll work fine. Or I can have the Ethernet and the external Wi-Fi card plugged in, unplug the Ethernet, and it will switch to the external Wi-Fi card. Or you can just plug the Wi-Fi card in and boot up without Ethernet. And the real advantage of this is that you don't have to change any of your routing. You don't have to change your PF config or anything like that. So using a lagg device is a good idea because it allows you to simplify your configuration and also how you're actually switching between devices. Now, the other thing I should mention here, if I come to, okay, you can see here, mode 11. So that's the one drawback about FreeBSD is the speed of the Wi-Fi is limited to G. So we don't have great speed. There's not really anything you can do about that. You can use Wi-Fi box, which is running a Linux virtual machine and passing through the Wi-Fi device to the Beehive virtual machine and getting it running that way. But seems like a bit of a faffle, bit of a faff to get that working. But using the lagg device, once you get it working, it's great. It happens instantly. The switching between Ethernet and Wi-Fi, there's literally no delay because it's actually already connected to the Wi-Fi at the same time as the Ethernet. So when you unplug the Ethernet, it's not going to say sort of searching, connecting, that sort of thing. It's automatically connected. So it just means that if you're working away at your desk and you're plugged in with Ethernet, you can just easily unplug the Ethernet cable, be on Wi-Fi and go somewhere else into another room and use Wi-Fi, even though you're going to be on 11G speed. That's the only drawback. So let's have a quick shifty at this. So we got the Freebsd Handbook, Advanced Network Aggregation, and the section it's actually under is Example 3, Failover Mode between Ethernet and Wireless Interfaces. And the important thing to remember about this is, that had me stumped, is you can, the way they suggest doing this is overriding the Ethernet's MAC address with that of the wireless interface. I did it the wrong way the first time round and it didn't work. I was trying to override the wireless interface with the Ethernet's MAC address, which is also possible apparently, but some Wi-Fi cards may complain if you do it that way. So again, what you have to do is you create the wireless interface, you then grab the Ethernet address, you go through these steps here, changing the device names to those on your system. You obtain an IP address, that sort of thing. And this is basically the block of code that you're going to end up with that you put in your etc.rc.conf. Once you reboot, and remember to change your pf.conf internal interface to lagg 0, you'll then have a failover mode so that you can easily unplug your Ethernet switch to Wi-Fi, plug your Ethernet back in, and you'll be back on Ethernet. And again, this is handy even with external Wi-Fi cards, because it just means that, as I said, you don't have to go through and change all your PF configuration to use the new interface, the wireless interface instead of the Ethernet interface. The other thing that's nice about this is I have Firefox here running in a FreeBSD jail, hence the LO1 interface showing up in my ifconfig, and the traffic is outputted using NAT in my pf.conf. So let me just have a etc. pf.conf. Okay, so we've got the lagg interface here. And you'll remember in my rc.conf, etc. rc.conf, what we had is this cloned interfaces section. So we've got laggo, which is for the failover device, and we've got LO1, which is for the jail. So you can see here's the interface if equals laggo 0. So this is like a macro. And then what you can do is reference the internal interface. So you can see here, so this line here, NAT on internal interface from LO1 network to any internal interface. That is what is used to NAT the traffic from the jail out. And as I said, what's really nice is this also works with the laggo interface as well. So what this means is I can use the jail on both Ethernet wired and when I'm running wirelessly as well. So that's just something else I thought I'd mention. The other thing is, if I just come across to some sort of brief notes I had. Okay, so if you run, this is dependent on your system and whether your card's supported. You can see here I'm running sysctl net.lan.devices, and that's showing up with IWL Wi-Fi 0. And that is the Killer 6 ATX card in the Dell XPS 15. When I run this command on my MacBook, and MacBook Air running FreeBSD, nothing shows up because it doesn't work with the IWL Wi-Fi. The Broadcom chips don't work with that. You have to do some other stuff, and I've never managed to get it to work. So that's why I'm using an external Wi-Fi card on those devices, with those machines, because they're running with a Broadcom chipset. So again, ifconfig, this is what the setup is going to look like. You can have your local device, you can have the WLAN 0. The important thing is the Ethernet on all of these three devices has to match. So you can see here 78A3 SSID. You can see all that's turned on. And then down at the bottom, we've got the Ethernet down here. You can see the Ethernet address matches the Wi-Fi card address. And you'll notice, as I said before, there is no IP address listed here or under WLAN 0. The IP address is actually under lagg 0. And you can see here again, the Ethernet address matches both the Ethernet and the Wi-Fi cards MAC addresses. So that's what gets this failover working, is by cloning the device using lagg 0 if there's no traffic coming through the Ethernet on this device here, it's then going to automatically fall back to WLAN 0. And then if you plug the Ethernet device back in, it'll recognize this traffic coming through this device and then use that automatically. And I said, what's great about this is you don't have to restart routing, netif, change your PF configuration, anything like that. It's all done automatically. One thing I have noticed is if you boot up without the, if you use an external card and you boot up without the card in, and then you just plug it in afterwards, it doesn't automatically work. So it's always best to actually plug in, if you want the failover device to work, it's always best to actually boot up with the external card plugged in. I think it may be a mismatch between the MAC addresses or something like that. But I have noticed some issues. But you can still use this with just the Ethernet plugged in or just the Wi-Fi card plugged in. So it's not going to interfere with anything, and all your routing will still work perfectly. So have a look at the handbook. This is going to depend on whether your card is supported on FreeBSD. And again, you are limited to 11G speeds. That is being worked on. So maybe sometime in the future we'll have speeds on FreeBSD compatible with those on Linux and other operating systems. But have a look at the advanced network aggregation failover, because it's really useful. It works like a charm. I say, I'll just do it again here. I'll just unplug the Ethernet and carry on Wi-Fi. So there we go. Ethernet unplugged. You can see there's no delay or anything. So plug it back in. And we're now back on Ethernet. Yeah, so you can see there's no downtime. And that's because basically it's connected to both the Ethernet and the Wi-Fi at the same time. And it will automatically switch between the two, depending on whether you've got the Ethernet cable plugged in. So have a look at that. I'll post links to my configuration for my Dell XPS 15 and MacBook Air 2011 and my MacBook Pro Retina 2015 running FreeBSD. And again, this works on, I've got this set up on FreeBSD 14.1 P6, which is the latest version at the time of recording. And I haven't had any issues with this at all. And it's good to have a look at getting the Wi-Fi working and being a bit more user-friendly to use, so you don't have to muck about with restarting services and editing configuration files. So that's all for now, and I'll post links to all this under the video.